Effective leadership and management really only come down to two elements. The first element is that you must be able to communicate your desires, your wishes, in an effective and inspirational way. And then the second thing that you've got to be able to do is you've got to be able to ensure that your communication is implemented, that it's understood first of all, and then implemented by each one of your employees. That's all leadership and management is really about. It's about communicating effectively and then ensuring that the communication is implemented. Let's talk first about how to communicate your desires effectively. Now, I said earlier that the goal is to communicate your desires effectively and in an inspirational way. That's almost an oxymoron in the sense that what is inspirational is sometimes not always the most effective, and what is the most effective sometimes is not inspirational. You see, there are different levels at which we communicate desires, and sometimes the most inspirational levels are the ones that are the most general. Right? We all know that many times inspiration comes from dreaming, from looking at the big picture. And sometimes the big picture is inspirational but not very effective. It doesn't tell you what to do on a daily basis. On the flip side, what is effective many times is saying this is what needs to be done, this, and this. That can sometimes be tedious, and sometimes it lacks inspiration when somebody's telling you exactly what to do. Well, we need to communicate on all ends of that spectrum. In other words, they must be inspired, but they also must know how to perform a job effectively. And our communication needs to span that. In order to do this, there are essentially 7 levels of leadership or management that we need to be able to communicate. And what that means is we need to be able to be clear about these 7 levels ourselves to begin with. The 7 levels are as follows. At the top, you've got what's called your vision. Your vision is the big goal, the big, future vision of where you want to be. Next, the next thing in line is what's called your mission. You've probably heard about mission statements, company mission statements, family mission statements, individual mission statements. Well, a mission is simply a statement of what you do and how you do it. The next thing that needs to be communicated are what are called values. Values are the things that are most important to you, the ideals, the principles that you live up to, that become standards for your life. The next thing that needs to be communicated is what are called areas of focus. These are the categories of things that you're going to focus on. For instance, in your individual life, areas of focus might include health, finances, social activity. In other words, the different categories. In business, what we're talking about are many times called departments, meaning there are different areas of focus. You may have one area of focus, which is employee recruiting and hiring. An area of focus for you, I mean. Another area of focus might be, for you, might be client acquisition. Another area of focus might be marketing. Another area of focus might be sales. In other words, the different departments that a company has form their areas of focus. They're the broad categories in which you're going to place attention. The next element that needs to be communicated is that there are what are called goals. Goals or projects within each one of those areas of focus. For instance, in our personal life, we may have one area of focus, which is our physical health. And we may set a goal to weigh a certain amount by a certain date. It's a short-term end that we're looking for. It's 90 days out, maybe a little bit longer than that, maybe a little bit less than that, but it's a target we're shooting for. It's something that's going to require a project, an intention to reach, and each one of your categories is going to have that. In other words, in your health category, you're going to have goals that you have about your physical body. When it comes to your finances, you're going to have goals that you have about how you build your finances, how you treat your finances over the next 90 days. Well, the same thing happens for a corporate or company environment. In other words, you need to have different areas of focus, different departments, if you will, and each department needs to have specific goals, specific things that you're shooting for in that area. And then finally, the last couple elements are that each goal is going to require that certain results, certain outcomes, certain endings are going to have to be accomplished. So results are something that you want to focus on as leading to a goal. And then finally, there's the individual actions. The actions that you focus on will lead you to the results, which leads you to the goals. Now, what's interesting about these 7 levels of management is that you need to be able to communicate them all, but they're all intertwined. And sometimes we have a tendency to communicate some of them more than others, or at one end of the spectrum more than others, and it gives us different qualities to our communication. To round yourself out as an effective leader or manager, you must communicate them all. Now, you may be already good at communicating some of these, and I'm sure that you've dealt with people in the past who are good at communicating some of these. Some people are really good at communicating the actions that need to take place. They're good at saying, you need to do this, do that, do this, do that, do this, and they communicate at the level of actions, occasionally results that need to be accomplished. In other words, they're at the lower end of that spectrum. Now, they can be very effective, and if you communicate this way to yourself, you are probably a very effective person. You probably get things done. Managers that you've had in the past that communicate this way, again, they are probably effective at producing actions, results, occasionally accomplishing goals. But what you've probably found about them is that they're not very inspirational because they're always telling you what to do. It almost becomes tedious. By the same token, you may be wondering, well, why am I doing this? And in fact, that is the question that runs up the scale, is why? In other words, each action, if you want to find out why you're doing it, you look towards the result. Why am I doing this way? Well, it's because I want to accomplish a certain result. And why is that result important? Well, because there's a goal. And why is that goal important? Well, because there's an area of focus that we are consistently working towards. And why is that area of focus important? Well, because there are values, there are standards that we hold. And why are those important? Well, because we have a certain mission and we have a certain vision. In other words, anytime you get the question why from an employee, it means that you've been communicating at the lower end of that spectrum, and they want to know what's up the line. Now, you may also be a person that's good at communicating at the higher ends of that spectrum, meaning that you're great at communicating your vision, your mission. You're always talking about where you want to be and what you want to do and where you want to see yourself in 5 years. And that can be very inspirational. Some of the greatest leaders in history are people that were able to paint the picture, the vision. The only challenge with that is that sometimes dreamers don't get a lot done, do they? Sometimes the vision doesn't take us all the way down to getting something actually happening. And in fact, the question that gets asked a lot of times of the visionaries is, well, how? Because that is the question that runs down these 7 levels of management. For instance, your vision is one thing, but if you ask yourself, how am I going to reach that vision? Well, you're going to reach it by putting into effect your mission, by doing what you do in a certain way. And if you ask, well, how am I going to do that? Well, it goes to your values, right? Well, I'm going to do it by upholding these principles. And if you say, well, how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to focus on different areas of focus. And if you say, well, how are you going to do that? Well, there's going to be certain goals. And how are you going to accomplish those goals? There's certain results. And how are you going to achieve those results? There's certain actions. So if you ever hear from your employees, well, how do I do that? It's probably because you've been communicating at the higher ends of that spectrum, at the higher ends of those 7 levels of leadership and management. What you want to be able to do if you're going to run an effective business, if you're going to be an effective leader and manager, is you want to be able to communicate all of them. And what that means is you've got to be set about what they all are to begin with. So one of the first things that you need to do is define each one of these areas. Effective leaders, effective managers have a very clear definition in every one of these 7 levels.